It was good to go back and watch it again. I could remember those simpler days of stealing snacks and then watching multiple movies.
Simpler days. You were a thief.
Yeah,
the simple days when you could just steal things.
Yeah. Shoplifting was much easier back then.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked out.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love when growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your three co-hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Carrie Tannen Gross.
Eat lead, slackers.
And each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films from our childhood still holds up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of the votes. At the end of each podcast, the three of us will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and right now, happening this moment, you can go online and download all of them. It's True Detective Season 3 with Big D, the King Bee, and Gene Lyons. That being said, Big D, what movie? We are recording 2 in a row.
Back to back.
Back to back. We're going head to head. So this is the first movie we're recording on a Sunday at 9:30 a.m. Probably 2 weeks like in the past, which I think
in the future.
Are we in? Yeah, we're in the future. No, they would be in the future. They're listening to this. I'm confused because it's a time traveling movie that we're doing.
Yeah, so we actually...
Spoiler alert.
People will listen to this on this Thursday. So we're not that far into the past.
We got to go back, Doc. We got to go back.
We got to go back.
When you were like, good evening, I'm like, fuck. It's fucking 9:30 a.m. over here. I don't even have my eyebrows on.
That's what I noticed differently about you. I was like, where are her eyebrows?
So the category was best sequels, and it was recommended by Bruno from Portugal. The contestants were, in order of that they finished, was Scream 2, Lethal Weapon 2, Mad Max 2, Batman Returns, Temple of Doom, and then the winner with 34% of vote, Back to the Future Part 2. It was the clear victor.
Yeah, any one of these. I mean, we ended up watching a really great movie, but any of these movies would have been fantastic. So Bruno, thank you so much for listening. And thank you. Listen, if you want to rent a room out to your old buddy, Roger Roper, I'd be happy to come over and hang out with you. And we could watch some of these movies in Portugal after we, toured around. Anyway, Back to the Future 2 is a 1989 American science fiction film directed by Robert Zemeckis. It is the sequel to the 1985 film Back to the Future and is the second installment in the Back to the Future trilogy. The film stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Thomas F. Wilson, and Leah Thompson. In the plot, Marty McFly and his friend Doc Emmett Brown travel to 2015, where bully Biff Tannen steals Doc's DeLorean time machine and uses it to alter history for the worse. The film was produced on a $40 million budget and filmed back-to-back with its sequel, Part 3. Filming began in 1989 after 2 years were spent building the sets and writing the scripts. 2 actors from the first film, Crispin Glover and Claudia Wells, did not return. Glover's character, George McFly, was minimized in the plot, obscured, and recreated with another actor. Glover successfully sued Zemeckis, changing how producers can deal with the departure and replacement of actors in a role. Back to the Future 2 was also a groundbreaking project for effects studio Industrial Lights and Magic. In addition to digital composition, ILM used the VistaGlide motion control system, which allowed actors to portray multiple characters simultaneously on screen without sacrificing camera movement. Back to the Future 2 was released by Universal Pictures on November 22nd in 1989, and the film received mixed reviews from critics. However, it went on to gross over $331 million worldwide, making it the third highest grossing film of 1989. We always ask the question, where were you? What are your memories of the movie? We'll start with you, Carrie Gross.
I think the first time I saw this sequel was to watch this for this review. Gene was originally supposed to record it, and I just happened to be watching it with him because he bribed me with pizza. I've been counting carbs, so I haven't had pizza in a very long time. But I don't think I would have sat down and watched this movie on my own. I know that I've seen Back to the Future, the original one, but I can't remember when. If it's been in recent years, if it was when I was younger. It's just one of those movies that you know the plot and you know specific scenes from it, but I don't have any recollection of like a time that I've sat down and watched it. So I would have to say, I think this is the first time I've seen this sequel.
And I have to remind our listeners here, Carrie, when were you born? What year?
87.
Yeah, 87. So you were 2 years old when this first movie. I think that's where the age disparity. I have to keep reminding myself of like where Big D and I have. Big D's even older than I am, but like there are times when Gene and I are like, yeah, we don't remember that because we were too young. Now this is the kind of movie that for me, it's because Big D, like we both vividly remember this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, Carrie said, what were you born? What year? 86?
87.
Oh my God. I remember watching Star Wars The New Hope in a drive-in in my parents' station wagon. That's a true story. So yeah, you have to remember that. But our audience, I don't think, is all 40-year-olds. So there's a lot of people now that the 80s and 90s are becoming fashionable and really in pop culture now, that people are going back and revisiting this. And if we can make somebody go back and watch some of these movies, I think we're doing our job.
Yeah, because Carrie, had we not been involved with the podcast, I feel like you would have completely missed out on this. And this is a big part of American pop culture. Back to the Future too, especially in our generation. And I think in the lexicon of Americana, like there are forces actively trying to prevent Hollywood from remaking this trilogy because I this is as perfect as it can get.
I was looking at the other movies up for the vote, and I'm thankful that, me filling in for this spot, that this was the movie that was picked, because if I had to do Temple of Doom, I've never seen any Indiana Jones movies, so I wouldn't understand. Like, would I be able to pick up on a sequel?
Yeah, it's not too complex.
I've seen Batman Returns, but it's been since probably it came out. Mad Max 2. I know I've seen Mad Max, but I can't remember. I mean,
do you remember the big weightlifting dude with the hockey mask in the desert?
Yeah, that's Mad Max 2 is probably the one that you remember.
And then Scream 2. Scream 2 is probably the only one I could have just done without having to watch Scream 1 first.
I don't know. Temple of Doom is a pretty much standard. Like, that's the great thing about the Indiana Jones films. We won't recognize the fourth, but like the Indiana Jones films stand alone on their own. Mm-hmm. Like they're kind of self-contained adventures that just happen to have Indiana in it.
So my memory of this movie was crystal clear. It was Mamaroneck Playhouse 4. This was in the bottom left theater, so I think it was theater 2. I've said before, I'm a huge fan of all time travel movies, even the bad ones like Time Rider. Any of them I've really loved in the 80s.
Time Rider.
Yeah, it's the one where the dude's on the motorcycle and he's going through the desert.
I think you like that movie because the cover art was cool.
No, it was anything with time travel. I'm telling you, I liked it. So traditionally what we would do, because we were kids, we would go to the CVS, which was right across the street. We would shoplift as much candy as we could. Then we would come over to the Playhouse. We would buy a ticket, get in if we couldn't sneak in the side door. And we actually watched this movie back to back, much like we're recording the podcast today. I saw it 2 times in a row and loved it. I love the whole trilogy. It's iconic. So it was good to go back and watch it again. And I could remember those simpler days of stealing snacks and then watching multiple movies.
Simpler days. You were a thief. The simple days when you could just steal things.
Yeah. There was
nobody cared.
Again, this is before video cameras. This is before the electric sensors. Shoplifting was much easier back then.
I'm glad the internet was invented. I bet kids staying inside has cut down on thievery and simple loitery as a result. But I definitely remember I saw this movie in theaters during the summers with Dad. I remember being blown away with the idea or the concept that the Back to the Future 3 trailer also accompanied this, because this was the first time that movies shot back to back. Like they were so convinced these movies were going to be a hit that they filmed the sequel back to back. That had never been accomplished before. Now movies do that. Lord of the Rings did that, where it shot continuously. You're seeing Avatar, I think, film multiple sequels. So now it's kind of commonplace, but this was a groundbreaking experience when it first debuted. And also, I can't talk about this enough, but the ride at Universal Studios was such a staple for kids in our generation that it made this movie that much better. The flying DeLorean, there was hoverboards. This movie had such an impact on American culture. That being said, Big D, play the trailer.
Do you remember the future?
You've got to come back with me.
Where?
Back to the future.
Are we back?
We're back.
What do you mean we're in the future?
October 21st, 2015.
Marty, we're going to be able to see our wedding.
Wow. The future. I gotta check this out, Doc.
Look what happens to your son.
Oh, he's a complete wimp.
Don't talk to anyone. You've been looking.
Hey, look!
Don't touch anything.
I need to borrow your hoverboard.
And try not to look at anything. I didn't invent the time machine to win at gambling.
I can't lose.
I invented a time machine to travel through time.
Hey, Doc, I'm all for that. What's wrong with making a few bucks on the side?
Now, the time continuum has been disrupted, creating an alternate 1985.
There have been a few changes.
It's like we're in hell or something.
No, it's Hill Valley, although I can't imagine hell being much worse.
But they'll all be back.
Eat lead, slackers!
Biff?
Hello? Hello, anybody home?
Mom, that can't be you. You're so big.
Michael J. Fox. Christopher Lloyd. Michael J. Fox.
More like a couple of teenagers, you know?
And Michael J. Fox.
Mom, is that you?
Steven Spielberg presents a Robert Zemeckis film, Back to the Future, Part 2.
On October 26, 1985, Doc Emmett Brown arrives in his DeLorean time machine and persuades Marty McFly and his girlfriend Jennifer Parker to travel to the future with him and help their future children, with Biff Tannen witnessing their departure. They arrive on October 21st, 2015, where Doc electronically knocks out Jennifer and leaves her asleep in an alley, explaining that she should not have too much knowledge of future events. He has Marty pose as his own son and lookalike Marty Jr. to refuse an offer to participate in a robbery with Biff's grandson, Griff, thus saving both of Marty's children from prison.
Okay, so I'm going to start off this movie that I love with a negative thing. And Doc Brown, he's a fucking hypocrite. Okay, I'm tired of Doc being like, Marty, we have to respect the timelines. You know, we can't risk changing things. This motherfucker does everything he can to alter the future as long as it benefits him. Why, number one, does Doc decide to land in the middle of the day? It's like, what, 11 o'clock in the morning on a busy street? He lands a flying time machine, then grabs Jennifer. And he's got a time machine. Doc, you could land at midnight and go get Marty.
I think at 11 o'clock, most people are at work, and it's a suburban. It doesn't look like a busy street. It looks like a suburban town in America. You're crazy.
Well, Biff sees them.
Also, where they're going, they don't need roads.
Also, he's so set on not manipulating the past or manipulating the future, but the whole premise of this movie is that he's come back in time to get Marty to then alter the future.
Yes. Yeah, and the first thing he says, Jennifer's out there. It involves your kids. He's already blowing up the future.
He's like, I have kids?
Yeah.
I think Doc Brown is being altruistic. He never intended, if you look at it from a linear format, which means that the original time machine and then every subsequent movie, they have to readjust the events of that timeline. I think it's because he's trying to undo the damage that he did. I think it's not done for a selfish reason, is what I'm saying.
Right, but he's selfish and doesn't realize it. He says we can't change the future, but then he goes and changes the future because bad things happen to Marty's family.
Because they weren't originally supposed to be that way. Maybe he was supposed.
Yes, it was.
You think so?
Yes, his son was always going to be a dork. He was always going to go with Griff. He was going to get arrested, and Doc just wants to change it.
But maybe Doc thinks that it's because he's already altered the events in the past that led to this. Maybe Marty's
Doc doesn't think that far in advance. Come on.
All right. So like, I'm a huge fan of Rick and Morty. I'm Big D. I turned you onto it. The original Rick and Morty was a satire of Back to the Future with the adventures of Doc and Marty. All I could think about is how similar this movie is to an episode of Rick and Morty, with like when Summer comes along and tags along because Jennifer is in the car. It's kind of ruined this movie for me because I think Rick and Morty does such a more effective job of the alternate dimensions, and that there's different versions of yourself, and some are fish and some are cowboys.
The only thing I'll let the listeners know, if you ever watched the first, I don't know what it was a rough short animated film that they created to get Rick and Morty launched. The story is Doc and Marty, and Doc Brown is trying to convince Marty to lick his balls. So Roger thinks that is a great.
You got to go back in time. You got
to lick my balls, Marty. Oh, yeah. So that's what Roger thinks is great entertaining.
Oh, geez, Rick.
But I'll try to go back and pull you into some of the facts of the movie. That you said in the bucket was there were 2 actors that didn't come back. You had Crispin Glover, who didn't come back because he was a little upset at the end of the first movie that it seems that the morality lesson that we get from episode 1 is that when the McFlys are poor, they're unhappy and sad.
Right.
When they have money, it equals happiness. So he didn't like that. And then he complained a bit about money. So they just cut him out of the second movie. So they used a body double. And they used some prosthetics they had to insert him into the movie. Right. They hung him upside down, so it was a little confusing. And even though he didn't win the lawsuit, Zemeckis and the studio settled out of court for an undisclosed amount of money. And then the Screen Actors Guild changed the rules. So even though people attribute it to him, he did change the future in the way that you could use somebody's likeness, because they were circumventing. They didn't just recast the character like they did Jennifer. They tried to make people think Crispin Glover was in it by intersplicing some old scenes from 85. Right. Now, the Jennifer role, I wish Jennifer would have come back because it would have been a little more continuity with the first movie.
Yeah.
But she didn't come back because Claudia Wells, unfortunately, her mother got sick with a really advanced form of cancer.
Oh my gosh.
So she quit acting for a bunch of years, and that's why she had to drop out. But I think missing Jennifer and George, there is a little disjointedness between the films and the trilogy as a whole.
There's a close-up picture on Weissman, the guy that plays George McFly. There's a close-up picture of him as the character on his IMDb page that is truly horrifying. Have you guys seen it?
No.
It's fucking so scary that they make him try to look like Crispin Glover so much. And it kind of reminds me of the Sixth Sister on Pet Sematary that's like really a man dressed as a 12-year-old girl. It's creepy. I'll post it on Twitter.
Okay, so how do you guys feel about like Disney with the Star Wars bringing back old actors that have passed on?
I think it's okay as long as you get the approval of the family. And when they brought back, it was Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah,
is that who it was?
Yeah.
When they brought him back, the family had to okay it. So I think it's cool. But at what point do we just go full digital characters?
Well, I think that's the danger.
You create a digital character that then the studio owns.
Okay.
So you never have to worry about Tom Cruise getting old. You just create your digital version, hybrid model, actor, and he'll be in every movie for everyone's lifetime. It's going to kind of be a bit scary.
So what if what if the actor dies on the movie? Do you still allow them to like use we talked about this in The Crow, right? Do you allow the studios to do that?
The difference is that the actor owns the right to their likeness.
Okay.
That you can't create a lookalike of George McFly. If you want to recast him, you can.
Okay.
But you can't put on prosthetics to make it look like Crispin Glover.
I see what you're saying. So you own the likeness of yourself. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, Marty switches places with Marty Jr. and refuses Griff's offer, but Griff goads Marty into a fight. Griff and his gang are arrested, saving Marty's future children. But before rejoining Doc, Marty purchases an almanac containing the results of major sporting events from 1950 to 2000. Doc discovers it and warns Marty about attempting to profit off of time travel. But before Doc can adequately dispose of it, they are interrupted by the police, who have found Jennifer incapacitated and are taking her back to her 2015 home. They pursue, as does Biff, who has overheard their conversation and picks up the discarded almanac.
So now we get more Doc hypocrisy. This fucking hypocrite. He's got a problem with Marty taking the sports almanac to alter the future to benefit him, but he doesn't have a problem fucking up the entire Tanner family history. Biff wasn't going to jail, but he gets the whole gang arrested, and he's like, "Yep, the timeline, the future's all good."
Actually, it's Tannen, not Tanner.
Okay.
We all know that Big D's never going to get the names right.
Yeah, we're going to get tweeted at. But listen, listeners, if you're doing the Shat the drinking game, take a sip for every time Big D mispronounces Tanner when he really means Tannen.
I like how, Doc doesn't have a problem with altering certain aspects of the future, but he clearly doesn't have a problem with leaving an unconscious girl asleep in an alley. What the fuck?
Next to a recycling center. Next
fine.
to an asbestos.
Prop her up over there.
She's fine. She's good to go. Again, it's like, why even bring her on board? I guess it makes sense when the plot later goes on, but Big D, your suggestion that, well, betting is bad and all that kind of stuff, and people shouldn't profit off the future, because the first thing people think of in time travel is, I'm going to get rich off of this. Are you saying that if you had access to a time machine, how much money would you go back in time and make sure you leave for your future self? Like, would it just be enough for your family to comfortably live on, or would you want to be a billionaire?
What if instead of going back in time and betting money on, things I already knew were going to happen, what if I just told myself to not take out that other credit card or pay cash for that one thing or put some money in savings? It was already my own money, but just saved myself from spending it in a fucked up way that I could ensure that, for instance, the first 3 years that I was a nurse, I had no idea you had to self-enroll in a 501k because I don't fucking know these things. They don't teach you in school. I've always bartended. And so when I switched jobs, I was like, does my 401k come with me? And they're like, you never enrolled in it. What the fuck? I've been working here for 3 years and I didn't have a 401k. And my job had a great 401k that met a certain percentage. If I could just go back in time and not bet on things, but made sure I filed my taxes correctly.
Right.
That would be great.
But in order to do that, you're supposing that you would go back and be able to talk to your past self, right? Or you, in your mind, time travel is, I'm going to go back and be the person that I was.
No, what fucking
in the past.
She would go back. She's old Carrie talking to young Carrie.
So you as old Carrie.
I would just go back, sit down at the public library,
and
log
yourself.
into my account, and enroll myself in a 401k. I wouldn't even have to tell myself I did it.
So you'd be like a benevolent mentor to your old self.
I'd put a freeze on my account.
I like that the hospital was probably like, shit, we're saving some money here. Does Carrie not realize that we're doing a match and contribute? Shh, don't tell her.
I work for a company whose software aims to solve that problem.
Oh, God.
Listen to this. I don't make a ton of money. I'm just a bedside nurse. I'm not administration. But last year I owed $2,000 fucking dollars on my taxes. And I was like, what the fuck? How does this happen? I don't know anything about taxes. And I go to HR and she's like, you haven't taken any state taxes out for the last entire year. I'm like, what? Why would I do that? She showed me the form and I clicked the wrong button. And of course I don't look, so I don't know. So for an entire year, I didn't take any fucking taxes out on my state.
She thought, wow, I got a raise. That's extra money each month.
I need a little guardian angel that just clicks the right buttons and reads through interest rates and things like that for me, because I don't know until it's too late.
Yeah. All right. So you would basically live the same kind of life that you are, just have a couple $1,000s extra in your bank account.
That'd be nice.
Okay. Big D, how rich would you make your present self?
You're not going to like my answer because you're going to think I'm a cheese dick and I'm lying about it.
I would never, no matter what you did in our relationship, ever consider you a cheese dick.
I could not change anything because I know how every little decision you make changes every interaction after that. If I went back, and you're going to laugh at me, and I feel anything that I would do would undo my life currently the way it is. My daughter, my wife, I wouldn't risk changing it because if I went back to the future and my daughter didn't exist, even if I had a different child, I would never risk it.
What if your new child's even cooler than Emma though?
Impossible.
Yeah. What
so if you came back, Roger, and you had two different dogs, two much cooler, more masculine dogs, would that be cool?
What are you talking about? My dogs are very masculine, as it is today, as you hear them barking in the background. They're about as masculine as a nuclear sub commander, so I think that's pretty masculine. Stick around and listen to Crimson Tide. We're recording that later today, but no, I think I would go back and I would make my family wealthy. I don't think that there's anything that would negatively impact my life to the point to where, like, I'm not saying that we have to be titans of industry, but I'm saying if like I was a very comfortably rich millionaire, I think many problems could be solved by that.
It's like that quote that's like, money doesn't buy happiness. No, but it puts a fucking roof over my head and I don't have to worry about. You know what makes me happy? Not having to take public transportation. A fucking car is nice.
Yeah. Here's what I would do with $1 million though. Like people always ask, well, what would you do with that? I would travel. I'd learn. My life would be a constant state of like self-realization, like self-learning. You know what I mean? I'd probably be philanthropic. I'd go to the gym more. Or not even go to the gym. I'd be like in that shape that world travelers are because all they're doing is walking and hiking and going to temples in India and Thailand. I might live for a month in a monastery. Who knows? I might even learn the arts of like, the shadow hand and kung fu and become a vigilante for a couple of years like Bruce Wayne did.
You are so self-unaware. I know you, Roger. If you had $1 million and didn't have to work, you would become a shut-in. You would sit around hitting your vape pen all day, watching endless streaming movies, ordering takeout from Grab or whatever it is, and you would not go out and DoorDash. You would not be walking around like climbing mountains and learning. You would become a shut-in.
I'd become the Howard Hughes millionaire. That's right. I'd have tissue paper boxes for shoes. I'd wear a robe. I'd stop bathing.
Yeah, until that $1 million ran out.
That's terrible. I don't know, though. All right, so the other thing that this movie is well known for is its future tech. People always kind of remember the hoverboards, but it's not nearly as cute or enjoyable as I remember. The only thing I did enjoy, though, and I didn't catch this the first 100 times I watched this movie, was the reference to retrofitting old cars with hover conversion. Like, that's the one thing that I thought,
I think it's funnier is how the future movies always get it wrong, that they're never accurate with what future technology would look like. In this, there are a couple. We don't have flying cars. We don't have hoverboards, but they do accurately depict the dinner table. You got the two kids with like their visors on, and they're essentially getting caught in their device. They're distracted from the parents. And you got the wall monitor, essentially the 50 channels that they could watch. So some of it is accurate. Yeah, granted, we didn't get the hoverboard. I think that would have been the cool thing to get.
We have self-tying laces now. Nike came out with their Back to the Future version of the shoe.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I read when I was researching this is that Zemeckis said that he didn't want to have the movie placed in the future because he always felt that futuristic movies predicted the future wrong, and that then when you end up in that actual time, 2015, that it just already seems dated and unrealistic. But I have to say with the hoverboards that it is very iconic for the movie. It's a throwback to the 1985 skateboarding. But I guess in an interview, he made a joke that hoverboards actually existed and they floated on magnetic energy. is quoted saying they've been around for years. It's just that the parent groups haven't let toy manufacturers make them, but they were able to get their hands on them for the movie. And in the movie, the boards say Mattel on them. And so for years after this movie was released, people were calling Mattel asking how they could get these hoverboards for themselves. And it was like the biggest hoverboard hoax ever.
Oh, yeah. It created a huge debate between all of our friends because I saw that too. He went above and beyond. He made it seem like a behind the scenes comment, like these existed and the parents had them hidden away. So my friends were like, fuck, no, they're real. They're real. We could get them. They just won't produce them. We thought the technology existed.
But there's product placement overboard. You talk about Mattel. You can really tell that Universal sold out here. Like, do you guys get as excited as I do when a marketing department convinces a corporation to invest in branding for a movie set in the future, only to fall, go bankrupt, or merge a few years later? Couple of examples. U.S. Airways, Pizza Hut, Black & Decker are prominently displayed throughout this entire movie. I just love seeing companies fail in the future. Like I think in Blade Runner, Pan Am was sponsor. It's no longer there.
Not only is it Pan Am, but it's TDK and it's also TDK. Atari. So yeah, this isn't just Back to the Future. This is, all movies. It seems like if you invest in product placement, it's like the curse. You go bad.
Pepsi. When's the last time you had a fucking Pepsi?
Well, it's no longer the taste of a new generation, I'll tell you that.
Well, that's true. I mean, come on. They brought you Maroon 5 at the Super Bowl, so they're still around. But
Maroon 5 wasn't that bad.
Shut your fucking mouth. Every 40-year-old white woman in America right now.
So there is one product placement though that they did turn down, thankfully. They had gotten an offer from Mustang and Ford to pay the producers $75,000 to have Doc Brown in a Ford Mustang. And Bob Gale's official response was, Doc Brown does not drive a fucking Mustang. Could you imagine if this time machine was a Mustang? Already this movie is not iconic.
Yeah, I think we already covered this in the first.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't for this movie that they were trying to push a Ford Mustang on. They tried to do it in the original movie. But you wonder if that was that going to be like the new Ford Mustang, or was it going to be the older Ford Mustangs that Doc Brown would have owned?
When's the last time you saw a fucking DeLorean?
Well, but it's iconic.
Yeah, but what we're saying. Again, back in the 80s, DeLoreans still were some around, but it made it so iconic. And you can actually order a shirt that says, Doc Brown doesn't drive a fucking Mustang.
It goes back to my earlier comment. Like, this was a movie set in the future. DeLorean was the car of the future. It went bankrupt like a year after this movie.
No, I think it was in bankruptcy before this. So it was already, it was a unique car. But I want to make a recommendation for a documentary. Go on to, I think it's on Prime. It's called Out of Time or At a Time.
Mm-hmm. It was also on Netflix. Yeah,
it covers the refurbishment and saving of the original A car. So when they made the movies, they made Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. The A car is the car that you see anytime it's close-ups. Anytime they're getting in and out of the car, anytime you see the car close up, it's the A car. That survived, and after Back to the Future 1 was done, they filmed 2 and 3 together, and then Universal took that car and had it on it was
just on the back lot.
Yeah. So
they just sitting there.
Well, they actually had it within part of the attraction. They had a guy, a really bad character actor, Doc Brown, who would park it in front of the ride, and guests could just come over, touch it, sit in the car. So people started taking pieces off of it. And in this documentary, they cover how bad shape it was in. They refurbish it. They bring it back to life. And these like 10 or 12 guys dedicated a year of their life and tens of thousands of man hours to faithfully recreate all the missing pieces and bring it back to life. They even put out on Bob Gale released a statement saying, please, if you've taken any parts off of this car over the 30 years that it was sitting out there, please return them. And people returned the flux capacitor. People returned the time switches. Major parts that had gone missing returned. And if you see the love that these guys had for this movie, it'll make you want to go back and watch the trilogy again.
Yeah.
Who the fuck are these people that are stealing shit off of this car? They're the same kids that steal candy from CVS. before going to the movie.
Yeah. That's right. That's where they develop their habits. It's like CVS is kind of like the gateway drug for thieves.
You're probably right. Young Richard, young Big D might have taken something, but now today, adult Big D,
you'd return it. You would return it.
Definitely would have returned it.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer wakes up in her 2015 home and hides from the McFly family. She overhears that her future self's life with Marty is not what she expected due to his involvement in an automobile accident. She witnesses Marty being goaded by his coworker, Douglas J. Needles, played by Flea, into a shady business deal, resulting in Marty's firing. Jennifer tries escaping the house, but faints after she encounters her 2015 self. And while Marty and Doc attend to her, Biff steals the time machine and uses it to travel to 1955 to give the almanac to his younger self to get rich betting on sports, then returns to 2015. Marty, Doc, and an unconscious Jennifer return to 1985, unaware of Biff's actions.
So one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie is the interaction between old Biff and young Biff. When young Biff turns back to his car, the convertible, and old Biff is there and starts it up with the secret kill switch, there's a wisdom that old Biff has in talking to his knucklehead younger version. You know, he says why don't you make like a tree and get out of here? He slaps him and says, you sound like an idiot. There's a wisdom that he conveys, and it's a great, great scene. It made me wonder, if you could go back in time, you have 10 minutes with your 18-year-old self. So Carrie is going to go back like 6 months to her 18-year-old self.
Right, and tell her to pay her bills.
I'm 31, okay?
Okay, so we're going to go back to your 18-year-old self. You have 10 minutes. You can't bring anything back. What do you say? What do you tell them?
Oh, my God. I think I would tell myself to not go to karaoke the night I went to karaoke and met my ex-husband. Like, I wouldn't even
But how would
say
you know? You don't have the date.
the date that I met him.
You're going to say, don't go to karaoke on the day you meet your husband. Young Carrie won't know what that is.
You could send to Western Union.
I could describe the scenario that I ended up at karaoke and say, just go home. Don't go to karaoke. If this happens to you, don't go.
But now you're depending on your 18-year-old self to remember that, is what Big D is saying.
Well, I wouldn't tell my 18-year-old self, you're going to meet your, because then I'd be like, oh, I'm going to meet my husband there.
Mm-hmm.
Just tell her to stay away from karaoke.
Period.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
You'll get killed if you go to karaoke.
Mm-hmm.
That's all she needs to know.
Got it.
It's true. It's true, though.
Raj?
Invest in Apple, Amazon, Google.
Yes.
Alphabet. The Zune will be a thing and then it won't be a thing. Don't worry, Melissa gets fat. No need to spend 2 years of your life depressed, thinking that another girl will never love you again. And then you'll see her and then you'll be like, yeah, I'm dodged a bullet there. What else? I'd say that pay a little bit more attention to women and not so much on yourself. So
you got to be a quick 10 minutes. You got to start rambling.
Yeah.
Through all
And
this shit.
then I would say, hang out with dad more because you never know. And yeah, try and develop, meaningful relationships with your family and friends and try not to be too selfish.
I would keep it simple. Like you said, Amazon stock, everything in Amazon stock, and then Netflix, everything in Netflix.
Everything in Netflix.
That's it. I don't want to get too much so that younger Big D gets confused. That's it. Don't go out. Don't buy things. Get an extra job and just buy stock.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. But like, have we talked? So you're okay now. It sounds like you're okay with using time travel in an altruistic manner. The thing though,
where's this? Didn't give a shit about money.
Yeah,
Amazon stuff.
Let's not use the time travel to our advantage.
Oh, it was hypothetical.
The problem,
Emma would still be there.
You're just worried about losing Emma. What if it happens where you're rich and you have Emma and Van still in the future? Your life is improved.
In a van? Oh,
Van. Yeah. Vanessa. Your wife.
I don't know.
Well, the problem that I have not is necessarily with the callbacks. It's the overuse of certain gags. like the chicken gag, the what are you, chicken, to make Marty do stuff. It's such a lazy plot device where the screenwriters need the protagonist to make a bad decision. You give him a silly reason like he can't be called chicken. It's constantly used throughout this movie. And, you know, after hearing all the reasons he screwed up in his life was for this reason, and it happens yet again. I mean, Big D, you talked about how old Biff seems to learn from his mistakes. He keeps correcting his young self. We just went through, like, what would you tell your old selves? You would tell them to improve. How does Marty McFly not realize that when people call him chicken, it's to push his buttons? How does he not learn from this?
Well, the problem is this wasn't in the first movie. There was never a case in part 1 where Marty is called chicken.
No, he is. He's called chicken. He's called chicken.
When? In part 1?
When
he doesn't. When he has to fight. In part 2.
Are you sure?
No, 100%.
Guys, call in. Let us know.
Nobody does it in the first movie, so that's why it's odd that they introduced in the second.
Actually, in Back to the Future 1, in the lunch scene, when Biff calls him chicken, he turns around and beats Biff up, which then turns Lorraine into liking him, right?
I don't believe that happened.
I believe that. I believe that is, in fact, I've got the chicken scene pulled up here on YouTube right now. Yeah, go over there and talk to her. He's trying to get his father to go talk to Lorraine, and then he gets interrupted by Biff and tries to walk away, and that's when Biff calls him chicken. So what I'm saying is all the events of Back to the Future could have been alleviated had Doc Brown just gone back to old Marty and been like, listen, when people call you chicken, don't respond.
True.
Yeah.
I think you're getting caught up on the too many gags that are required for the plot to move forward. I'm thinking this is when we're introduced to the future McFly family. And I'm thinking, is there way too much Michael J. Fox right now? I mean, I love him. He's the definition of 80s teen cool. But when Marty's daughter comes down the stairs and you can clearly see it's played by Michael J. Fox, I laughed. But then after that, you see every single family member is played by Michael J. Fox. It's a little much. And when we were watching it, Gene was like, who does he think he is? Eddie Murphy?
Yeah, it was like fucking Norbid.
Or you went with Norbid. You went with Norbid. You went with the movie that people were like, yeah, Eddie Murphy, you've done enough. Okay, like we don't need this anymore. You went with Norbit.
He did do it. What was the other one? The professor, the nutty professor?
That's the one that people revere. Yes. Yeah, that's the one. Not Norbit.
I mean, luckily the movie can, pick up quickly after that. We don't stick to that very long. But another thing I found annoying was that all the older or the future versions of the characters who are in their 40s are talking like they're old, frail senior citizens. We're watching this and I'm like, why is she, oh, Marty? I'm like, she's fucking 47 years old. What's with the trope of the older people who are, I'm sorry, your guys' age are talking like, Marty.
Well, I mean, think about it. We just covered License to Drive, and there's a scene where, like, I think Corey Feldman's was like, your dad's 40. He's not going to see that scratch. I'm thinking to myself, fuck you, Corey Feldman. I can see scratches on my cars just fine.
No, but if you look, the makeup on Marty, on Jennifer, and on his father, on Grandpa, McFly, they all look like they're the same age. I kneeled over to I went over to my wife and I tapped her. I said, yep, that's what you look like. That's what Hollywood thinks you look like. And she's like, oh, that's awful.
I don't know, guys. How about this cursing, though? Were you guys as shocked as I was with all the cursing? This movie was rated PG. PG, not even a PG-13. They're saying bitch. They're saying, I think they say asshole a couple times.
There's 3 shits.
Yeah,
there's
shit.
An asshole and a bitch.
Yeah.
How did you get away with that?
PG.
I didn't catch any of it, but maybe because every other word out of my mouth is fuck. I didn't catch it, but when I saw your notes about this, it made me think, did you guys ever get in trouble for cursing? I mean, this is me at 31, but me at 9 was the same. My parents just always cussed around me. I was constantly getting in trouble for cussing in school, my grandparents, even now as an adult, I'll have a patient and I'll just be talking. I'm like, isn't that fucking? I'm like, oh shit, fuck. I can't catch myself up.
I try not to curse that much, or at least I think I don't. But you always know how much you curse on the regular when you go and visit your friends with kids. Because you'll just be talking like you talk to your friend that you've done forever, but now they have a newborn and you let a shit or a fuck or a damn it in front of the kids. And all of a sudden your friends that you've known for years are like, can we tone it down just a little bit? There's
God
children.
forbid that newborn all of a sudden be able to understand language
We don't
and
want
regurgitate what you just said.
We don't want his first word to be fuck. Roger, can you please do that for us? We'd rather it be like something productive like mama or dada, but not one of the filthy phrases that come out of your dirt single mouth. That's how you feel.
Yeah,
When
I think Roger said cocksucker in front of my daughter.
I have never said that. And if I did, it was only to describe the present that I got your daughter on Christmas because it literally is a cock.
Hey.
When I was like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, my cousins and I were playing that board game Sorry.
Right.
And I don't know, one of my male cousins said something. I was like, you're a prick. And my grandma was like, what did you just say? And soap in the mouth. I had to hold the soap in my mouth and swallow it. And she was like, how do you know what a prick is? And I'm like, he's acting like a prick. And I just kept saying after she even put the soap in my mouth. So
yeah. A fun exercise is to go back. There's a couple websites and find out curse words from like the turn of the century. And just use those because then it's old timey and fun and Gentile. And then people just think that you're a hipster and live in Brooklyn.
Tommy knockers.
That's right. Tommy knocker.
Don't touch my Tommy knockers.
So, all right. See,
old timey.
Well, I have a question. I want to go back and you said how a lot of the gags were set up just to have convenience of the plot.
Yeah.
We can't gloss over this. It's 2015. Old Biff. He's been sitting hiding behind the screen door. He's heard Marty's plan. He knows about a time machine.
Sure.
He then sneaks into the time machine, which Marty leaves, empty again. Number one, how does he know how to fly a time machine,
right?
Get it to work, go back in time, park it in 1955, and then why the fuck does he return to 2015? Why wouldn't you just go dismantle it in 1955, so there's no chance of undoing the future or the past?
So what you're saying is that when he went back to give the almanac, he should have destroyed the DeLorean.
Destroy it there, then the movie's over.
But then he would have 2 versions of himself living in the same timeline.
It doesn't matter. You kill yourself. You've changed your life.
You think
why would you kill your younger self?
No, his current self. But if you think that you were there and you're your own sentient being and you give your young self an almanac, that you would be able to be like, okay, I'm going to kill myself. It's still fucking scary.
No. Yeah, you want to go back and like live the rewards of your efforts.
But you're going to go back and give the time machine to the people who want to undo what you've just done.
He doesn't give the time machine. He gives the almanac. Oh, what you're saying is give it back to Doc.
He goes and parks the DeLorean in the exact same spot it was.
I see what you're saying. Well, he doesn't want to get caught. He doesn't think that.
Fuck getting caught. You've just changed history. Fine. Go back to 2015 and destroy the car. Don't park it right where it was.
Well, it's very interesting that he returns back into the same timeline that he should have just altered.
Yes. And I'll discuss that later. That's a major problem I have.
Got it. So once Biff returns, leaves the DeLorean for Doc and Marty of 2015 to return to, they go back to 1985, and they are now in the world where Biff has become wealthy and corrupt and has changed Hill Valley into a chaotic dystopia. Marty's father, George, was killed in 1973, and Biff has forced Marty's mother, Lorraine, to marry him, and Doc has been committed to an insane asylum. Marty and Doc determined that the 2015 Biff took the time machine to change 1985, and Marty learns it from the alternate 1985 Biff that he got the almanac on November 12th from 1955. So Biff tries killing Marty, but Marty flees and then travels back to 1955 with Doc, leaving Jennifer on her own front porch. If this sounds confusing, it's really not that confusing.
Jesus Christ, I just had a fucking thought. If Biff went back
to
the past with the DeLorean to give his wait, don't interrupt me. To give the Because if I fuck up, the thought's gone.
Okay.
If he gives the almanac to his young self, then that inadvertently changes his entire future, and his 2015 self wouldn't have parked the DeLorean because he wouldn't, like the old Biff with the cane wouldn't be parking the DeLorean because in the entire space between those years wouldn't end up with him being the old crippled parking the DeLorean. Doesn't make any sense.
Bing, 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 bing. We've got a winner. You are correct.
But what you're supposing is that in order for the timeline to exist that 2015 happened, whereby which Marty and Doc of 1985 go into the future to change and alter the events, the Biff dystopia needed to happen. Like all of this is always a loop that was intended in this dimension. So all these events already took place.
I'm going off of what the movie says. And my problem is this. The movie breaks its own rules. I don't care if you're saying time travel exists. You could give me the most unrealistic, ridiculous rule, but if it's in world and you follow it, I'll believe it. But they break those two primary rules. Kerry's right. Doc says, and Marty said, well, why don't we go back now to 2015 and stop Biff from getting the sports almanac?
Okay.
Doc's answer is we can't do that because the future's already changed. If that's the case, then how did Biff go from 1955 back to 2015 and it was in the same timeline? They just told you it wouldn't work. That's why Doc and Marty go back in time instead of going forward, because Doc has said the future has already changed. He draws it on the chalkboard. Once you're back in the point and you change the past, you cannot go forward to your old previous timeline. You can only go forward to the new future that has been created.
You can't go back to, okay. What I'm saying is that if there's a loop where all of this happened, but I think more likely it is that this is a movie and don't try to overthink it.
Fucking kill me.
No,
kill me.
They tell Doc tells Marty you can't do it, but then Biff just did it. The other problem that I have with them breaking their own rules is, let's go back to 1985. The first time that Marty jumps into the future so that they can change the history of their kids.
Sure.
Marty and Jennifer and Doc have disappeared for 30 years. They don't exist because in the first movie, remember when Einstein jumps a minute ahead? Doc says for that minute, he did not exist in this timeline. So when 1985, Doc and Marty and Jennifer jump 30 years into the future, that future would be a future where they've been gone for 30 years.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying it's a movie and let's try not to overthink it.
Okay. I just want them to respect the world.
You just want them to
respect what they teach me.
Well, this takes me back to Rick and Morty, because Back to the Future does introduce the idea that time travel has positive and negative outcomes for the future. So do you think it's more like the chalkboard in the Back to the Future universe? What you just explained, you don't believe that there's alternate dimensions. You believe that there's just alternate timelines in the same dimension.
I don't believe you can travel through time.
Okay.
Period.
No alternate dimensions. No time travel. No alternate. There's no world where the three of us are doing a podcast and we're like goldfish. That world, that universe does not exist.
Where some of us are chairs.
No.
If I had gone back in time and told my 18-year-old self to not go to karaoke, to then not meet my ex-husband, I wouldn't have met Gene Lyons and I wouldn't be on this fucking podcast with you guys.
It's the Celestine prophecy.
Yeah, but then since we didn't talk about you going back in time to tell your younger self not to go to karaoke, would that younger version of Carrie still gone to karaoke and then it would have undone all the changes?
This is too much for me. It's fucking 9:30 in the morning, guys.
I think now's a good time to talk about the fact that they're really pushing Back to the Future 3 at this point in the movie. They really love shoehorning in blatant reasons for Back to the Future 3. Like when Doc and Marty first arrive and they see the Biff casino, there's like the history of the Tannen family that they have to walk through. And like, well, back in the old Wild West, it all started with his ancestor, Mad Dog Tannen. Then there's other parts where they're like, oh, you're Marty, the McFlys have been in Hill Valley since the 1800s. Like they're really wanting that third movie to be a success. They really want you to go see it.
Oh, but those are the obvious ones. They did 10 times more subtle ones. Biff is in there watching the Clint Eastwood movie where he hides the top to that stove under his, like, what is that? What is that thing called? Not a cape.
It's a poncho. It's a poncho.
His poncho that he uses a bulletproof vest. Or Doc being like, I could go back in time and find the other mystery of life, women. Or my favorite time, the Old West.
Wild West. Right.
They do it a bit heavy-handed. I get it. We know what the third movie is going to be.
Even the scene where the past Marty McFly comes in to save his future son in the diner, the two little boys are playing that like Western shooting game. That's actually Elijah Wood. Did you guys notice that? That's Elijah Wood.
I did notice that. Yeah, small. He's roughly the same height.
Roger always notices the young boys.
No one likes pedophile jokes. No one likes those. Those aren't good.
Speaking of pedophiles, there's a lot of Michael Jackson in this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of
2015, we're still bumping Beat It. Kill me.
The elephant in the room here when it comes to 1985 alternate version of Biff Tannen, where it's Mad Max and his schools have been, they're no longer around. They haven't been around for 6 years. The elephant in the room is that people, God, I can see all the hate mail coming in now from a couple of our listeners on Twitter. People have made allusions to this version of Biff Tannen in Back to the Future is Donald Trump. Like, do you guys believe this or do you not believe this?
Yeah, you got to remember that when this was written in '89, Trump was a businessman in New York who lived in a big gold building, was renowned for being this over the top. The appearance looks the same. So I don't think any of the presidency was predicted, but I think this is a caricature of 1980s Donald Trump in New York, developing properties and becoming a larger than life caricature.
You know who I think is an actual depiction and inspired by Donald Trump character in a movie?
Who's that?
Francis from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Oh yeah. Absolutely 100%. Please someone send in money for that movie.
I know you are, but am I?
What am I? Well, so it did come out and it was confirmed. Back to the Future Part 2 screenwriter Bob Gale, in an interview with the Daily Beast, said that Donald Trump was in fact the inspiration for the character that he and Robert Zemeckis created for this movie. He's quoted as saying, "We thought about it when we made the movie. Are you kidding? You watch Part 2 again, and there's a scene where Marty confronts Biff in his office, and there's a huge portrait of Biff on the wall behind Biff, and that's the one moment where Biff kind of stands up and he takes exactly the same pose in the portrait." Yeah, that's exactly, because if you look at Donald Trump back in the 80s and when he was on TV and there were all these spots about him, everything was the gold apartment that he had and pictures of himself, and he would always stand in front of it. All these narcissistic tendencies have always existed about Donald Trump. Now, they did say that the one thing they got wrong was Biff's signature insult, butthead. It's obviously loser, but it's very similar. And it says, of course, we don't have Jaws 19, but we do have Sharknado 3. So I guess he's making the comparison in that respects when Marty first gets to Hill Valley. But so for all those people who said, oh, that's a liberal agenda, no, it really truly is, but they never really fully predicted that he would become president. So that being said, Marty secretly follows 1955 Biff and watches him receive the almanac to his 2015 self. Marty then follows him to the high school dance, being careful to avoid interrupting the events from the previous visit. However, after several fruitless attempts, Marty finally gets the almanac, leaving Biff to crash into a manure truck again.
When Gene and I were watching this, I mean, we both just kept saying over and over again, as soon as you get the almanac, fucking destroy it. Don't put it in your back pocket. Don't try to jump off in the skateboard and blah, blah, blah. Just destroy it, because it only leaves opportunity for it to get stolen again and to extend the timeline that you're in. And I don't know why he doesn't immediately destroy it until Doc tells him to. Does that make sense?
No, but I'm more amazed that he ever gets it in the first place. he fucking is the worst like tracker ever. He's 2 feet behind Biff all the time. He jumps down in the stairs. How does Biff not hear him? He tells him to dress, incognito. He looks like an evil hipster version of the Fonz. So I wouldn't expect him to burn it when he first got it. I'm just shocked that Biff didn't turn around at any point and be like, hey, why are you following me?
Hey, there's a man in my back seat talking on a walkie-talkie that I just,
Yes.
I can't hear that.
Hey, there's a hovering car 2 feet behind me.
The biggest issue that I have is that, so this all happened in the first movie, like supposedly just off the camera, or is it a situation where if you go back in time to the timeline that you originally altered,
here we go
your
again,
other self will
Jesus
still be
Christ.
there?
No, I go back to the same thought about changing futures. Marty has no problem paralyzing those 3 henchmen of Biff's.
They deserve
That 500 or 600 pound sandbags hitting the top of their head and compressing their spines. Kerry, they are paralyzed, not.
Or they at least
They're
have a
just knocked
subdermal
out.
hematoma.
They have to be injured, and then Marty drops it on them twice.
Yeah. Well, Marty does, in fact, burn the almanac, reversing Biff's changes to the timeline as Doc hovers above in the time machine. But before Marty can join him in the time machine, the DeLorean is struck by lightning and disappears. Meanwhile, a Western Union courier immediately arrives and delivers a very old letter to Marty. It is from Doc, who explains that he was transported back to 1885. And Marty races back into town to find the 1955 Doc, who has just helped the original Marty to 1985. Shocked by Marty's sudden reappearance, Doc faints. End movie, where it says, to be continued. And Back to the Future 3, Red Dead Redemption 3.
Okay, so Marty, we've seen that he's not that bright lately. He's in a torrential downpour. It is raining so hard. There's a 70-year-old letter written on some kind of parchment. Would you have pulled that out in the middle of a rainstorm? Imagine if the rain just turned this paper and it started smearing the ink and you couldn't read the message that Doc had given him. Why couldn't you have just taken, hey, let's go in your car and read this? Having it out there, I thought it was dangerous. I would have tried to protect that letter a bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something like, listen, if I had made bets around the office and I was possibly going to win, I would definitely try to treat that letter in better care because, I mean, you have to imagine parchment, especially from the 19th century, it's very difficult. Like if you go to the Smithsonian or you go to any museum, all that is behind like tempered glass. So I totally agree with you.
But also, I don't want to open back up the whole timeline and time,
Please, God, no.
I'll just make it quick for the people out there who are listening. So Doc in the 1800s writes this letter and says, hey, Marty, I've hidden the DeLorean. Marty then takes the DeLorean, goes back in time, but the Native Americans shoot the gas tank and he runs out of gas. 2 problems with this. Why doesn't Doc then just modify the Western Union telegraph to say, hey, Marty, by the way, bring some extra gas because we might need it? He has a chance to alter that message.
That's true. It's an Empire-like ending. The movie does end on an obvious cliffhanger. We're left in the dark. Part of why we love the first Back to the Future, though, was the ending. Did this leave you unsatisfied or excited to watch Back to the Future 3? Because all those scenes trailers for Back to the Future 3 made me do was want to go play Red Dead Redemption, which I have done for the past 48 hours.
Does this make me want to watch another movie about time travel?
Yeah, about Back to the Future. Did you want to go watch Back to the Future 3?
I did until we started
Immediately
recording this cast. I'm done with the Back to the Future now. Maxed out.
I didn't think they needed to stick the trailer right at the end. I think it would have been better with just a, to be continued or to be concluded by sticking in that trailer, which includes a scene of Marty dressed in old Western gear back in the new 1985, waking up Jennifer on the bench. That's the end of the fucking movie. Why did they include that?
I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is in Back to the Future 2, the ending was so good. Or I'm sorry, in Back to the Future 1, the ending was so good. There was all the thrills. There was really none of that, unfortunately. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that the music was so iconic. Like, again, I've changed my ringtones to be Back to the Future now. Most people assume, and Big D, you posted on Twitter that we were celebrating John Williams' birthday. I think, this was like if you're listening to this in the future, it was 3.5 weeks ago, but most people assume that John Williams wrote the score for this film. It was not John Williams.
It's because it was awesome. People think anytime there's a good score, they're like, "Oh, it's John Williams." You could tell people this is John Williams. They'd believe
they would
us.
believe it.
Yeah.
It's actually Alan Silvestri, who Zemeckis often collaborates with. Silvestri also wrote music for another movie we've reviewed on the podcast, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We haven't done this yet, but it has been suggested a lot. Forrest Gump, that was also Alan Silvestri, and also numerous Zemeckis films. I think most people just assume it's John Williams, like you said, because it is awesome. Also, there was Spielberg involvement, like he produced these films. But regardless, we all still want to wish John Williams a happy 87th birthday. Keep going, John Williams. Isn't John Williams' son in Toto? I think that's...
Couldn't tell you.
I think that's right.
Big Toto fans were not.
Gonna take a lot to tear me away from you.
So did anyone else read about the alternative ending that Biff dies in the original script and he had somehow altered his own future so he no longer existed in the future of 2015. And according to those drafts, he marries Marty's mother, but then she has shot and killed him because he was abusive in 1996. I guess there's a deleted scene in the DVD extras that makes it much more clearer that we actually see Biff start to vanish, like his physical body starts to vanish. But I think that would have been a better ending.
I think domestic abuse and murder. That's what we need in our comedies.
They went really dark with this original script.
Dark.
There's some dark elements.
Did they throw in there where like Marty was sexually abused by Biff as a kid too? Or Doc?
Ew.
Doc's like, "Hey, let's get in the time machine." Marty's like, "What do you mean, Doc?"
I'm pretty sure that's what Justin Roiland was trying to uncover when he made his original short on Channel 101, Doc and Marty, The Adventures of Doc and Marty.
Lick my balls, Marty.
Oh, geez, Doc. Now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, Zero Wipes is a perfect movie. It's like going to the bathroom and not having to use the toilet paper at all. 5 wipes is going to a public restroom, it being completely filthy and still having to use the bathroom because you got to go so bad because you're in a taco joint and there's not enough toilet paper to clean what you have, even though there's a Costco size roll there. So 5 wipes is bad. 0 wipes is really good. We'll start with you, Carrie. This is your first time watching Back to the Future 2 in its entirety. How many wipes would you give it?
I think making a good sequel is tough, and making a time travel movie is tough. So making both and making it fresh and funny is nearly impossible. And like I said earlier, Zemeckis said he didn't want to deal with the future because of misprediction, but I found that the future predictions were goofy. I love that the characters are constantly trying to explain to each other the paradoxes of altering the past or the future, but then also going against their own rules about time travel and alterations. As far as sequels are concerned, I was trying to think of any sequels that I've seen or enjoyed. So, I mean, it's not I would say my favorite sequel is Dawn of the Dead, but I do like this one. I think it's timeless, even though it's, a time traveling movie and predicts the future wrong. Carl Sagan, I was reading a quote, considered this the greatest time travel movie ever made. He praised the accuracy. Yeah.
This one, part 2?
Yeah. He praised the accuracy in handling the multiple timelines as what would really happen if time travel were possible. And I think we have to give credit to Zemeckis because this is, the beginning of having one actor play multiple characters. He's really pioneering a certain type of special effect here. And as a writer, director, producer, he makes a lot of really great films. So I don't know. I didn't look to see what you guys rated the original, but I'm going to say it's a 1 wipe movie. I think I'm maxed out on Back to the Future right now, but in the future, I may try to watch the 3rd installment of the series.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you say that because I made the joke during our Back to the Future review that it's a good movie that just happens to have time travel in it. Meaning, unlike this version, unlike the sequel, Back to the Future 2, the plot is solely dependent upon time travel. Whereas the original one, it's a charming movie where a guy goes back in time, but then the rest of the time it's just a good movie, right? So I remember this movie being better, but I agree with you, Carrie. It's tough to make a similarly iconic sequel, which in some cases is loved even more. And I think most people think of the Flying DeLorean than they do than the original one. But all the obvious references to the third movie detracted from like the overall story and its dependence upon time travel. Also, the chicken gag ran long for me. However, despite those flaws, it's still a fantastic movie. It's just not perfect like the last one was. So I agree with you. I'm also going to give it a wipe. It's just one wipe though, but not nearly flawless like it was the first time we watched this. We'll end with you, Big D. How many wipes do you give Back to the Future to?
I think I'm going to make it unanimous. I think it's a one wipe. I love the trilogy as a whole. I had much better memories of this movie because this one's not as universally loved as the first.
It's really not. It's like, strange. It has a 63% fan rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's shocking to me.
But going back and watching it now, I get why. The first one is magical. It's like you said. It's time travel is a secondary. It's the plot device that gets you through. Here, there's so many loop within a loop. They needed to do that. It's the glue that holds the trilogy together. It's the one that gets us from the first episode to the third. Everyone remembers the flying car. They remember the little bit in Hill Valley in the future, but most of the movie is jumping back and forth between the timelines and then going back into the alternate 85. I just think it wasn't as enjoyable. It's not a complete movie. It's more the bridge to get you from the beginning to the end. For that, I think one wipe. It's still great. I still loved it. It's still Back to the Future. It's still iconic. I gave the first one a 0. This one is not that, but it is still much better than most movies in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. So one, I think, is fair.
Yeah. Again, it's interesting. Like you said, it's a fun movie. It really is. I don't know if that came across in our review. It's fun to watch. There's just all these questions that come up that I think the movie is too reliant upon. And that makes it not as fun as the original one, but it's still a good, iconic movie. All right. Well, with that being said,
one last thing I want to say. We didn't even touch on it. I think with a different casting of Thomas F. Wilson, this trilogy is not as iconic.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
Biff, the actor who played him, does such a masterful job of making this bully loathed, lovable, comedic, bumbling. He gets overlooked so much. People think of Doc and Marty. Without Biff, without Thomas F. Wilson's performance, I don't think it's nearly as iconic.
Yeah, so when the Universal attraction opened in Florida, Thomas F. Wilson and oh gosh, help me out here, Christopher Lloyd, who plays Doc Brown, both filmed. They recreated scenes for the ride at Universal Studios, which at the time was kind of a big deal, right? Because here's an iconic movie, and these people are stepping back into their roles. The people are quoted that produced those scenes for the ride are they say Thomas F. Wilson couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been such a complete departure from the actual character he plays in the movies. Like Thomas F. Wilson, I think is still doing Comic-Cons, and I think he's universally loved. If you go to Comic-Cons and you take pictures with him, he's not the kind of guy that like demands $100 pictures or anything like that. Like he's a man of the people, and people seem to really enjoy him. So yeah, I agree with you. Thomas F. Wilson is the glue that he's not Crispin Glover is what we're saying. He's the anti-Crispin Glover. So with that being said, 1-1-1, that I think simple math, we're all universally giving this a one wipe score, which puts it where, Big D, in the pantheon of Shat?
That now ties it in the 16 spot with Empire Strikes Back, Conan the Barbarian, Rounders, and The Terminator. It's better than 7 and Coming to America, and it is slightly worse than Beetlejuice, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Good Will Hunting.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that feels right. Yeah, it's strange that you made the allusion to Empire Strikes Back. I think Empire Strikes Back is a little bit better than this, but I had the very same reactions going back and watching Empire Strikes Back with Gene now that as I did here watching Back to the Future 2. So yeah, I think it's right where it needs to be. Big D, I think we're saving our shout outs because we're recording another episode right after this. But what is the category for those who are listening in the future? What movie are we doing next, or what's the category?
All right, Rod. So the next movie we have is a commission from Rod H.
Woohoo!
And it is, after the Cold War, a breakaway Russian republic with nuclear warheads becomes a possible worldwide threat. U.S. submarine captain Frank Ramez, played by Gene Hackman, signs on a relatively green but highly recommended Lieutenant Commander Ron Hunter, played by Denzel Washington, to the USS Alabama. It was released on May 12, 1995, directed by Tony Scott, music by Hans Zimmer, and this was a good one. So stay tuned to the trailer to hear what movie we're doing next. But thank you, Rod, for the commission. And that's it. We're going to record this right after. So you guys will have to wait a week, but we're doing it right now.
Spoiler alert. It's not the Kelsey Grammer helmed down Periscope. It's not that one. Sorry to burst everyone's bubbles. This concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow the handle Shat the Movies. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for Shat the Movies Podcast, our website, where you can vote on upcoming movies as well as throw us a commission. Listen, everything is free. We're not behind a paywall. We don't make you pay monthly on Patreon. But if there's a movie you really want your buddies to review and make this feel like it's specially made for you, there's a link on our website where you can do that. If you don't have the amount of money that it takes to do a commission, which I think is like $100, then you can support us every time you shop on Amazon. We have an affiliate link. It's also on our website. Just go to shatthemovies.com. You can also email us, hosts@shatthemovies.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That does help the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and True Detective. You can find all the information on that website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Carrie Tannen Gross, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for this following commissioned podcast review. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, good night, and good luck.
As you no doubt heard, my exo has appendicitis. Your name was at the top of the list.
Well, that's good to know, sir.
It was a short list.
There's trouble in Russia. So they called us. And we're going over there and bringing the most lethal killing machine ever devised.
The last time we hit this state of emergency was 32 and a half years ago during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is what it's all about, gentlemen. It's what we trained for.
Submerge the ship.
Diving officer, submerge the ship. Make a depth 150 feet.
On the 1MC. Dive.
This year,
we have a properly formatted emergency action message from National Command Authority.
What we've always known.
Bravo, Echo, Charlie, Alpha.
Becomes what we've always feared.
Gentlemen, this is the captain. Russian rebels have threatened to launch against our country and are fueling right now. This is not a drill.
Now.
Sir, we have a possibly submerged submarine.
You find out who that is.
Receiving emergency action message. Recommend alert 1.
The battle for survival begins.
That's a message fragment.
Sir, we don't know what this message means. Our target package could have changed.
I've made a decision.
There's no place for fear.
He's lost his nerve.
I'd rather go out myself and get this one wrong.
There's no room for mistakes.
If we launch and we're wrong, what's left of Russia is going to launch at us.
I'm captain of this boat. I don't have to think this over.
There's no time for doubt.
Missile system's ready to launch in 6 minutes.
You repeat this order or I'll find somebody who will.
Hell no, you won't, sir.
And nothing can stop the tide.
Torpedoes in the water.
Right forward.
1,000 yards of closing dive. Make your depth 1,200 feet.
We cannot launch our missiles unless both you and I agree.
They're fueling our missiles.
He's right on top of us.
Please commando. Under arrest. Under charge of mutiny. Launcher ready.
Lock Captain Ramsey in his stateroom.
Fire one. Now. Give me the missile key, Mr. Hunter. Sir, we are going down. I'm the commander of this ship.
Crimson Tide.
God help you if you're wrong.
If I'm wrong, then we're at war. God help us all.